Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Awareness Podcast with your host, Bill Free. Thank you for being here. And it's my honor to host a new person to our podcast who has an astounding, just really amazing history and journey and story. His name is Jay, or he goes as Justin Gold. And I want to thank you for being here, Justin.
My pleasure.
Justin is a spiritual master, and he's the founder of a nonprofit that does it helps third people in other countries, people around the U.S. in supporting different organizations and people that are in need. And I think we're going to have a very alive conversation with Justin today. Mostly what I'm interested in conveying is how Justin takes the lead role in his visionary experiences and paving the way to support people in their where they need help, and also the students, the people that found him as a mentor and guide. He's a teacher and a guide in helping people to realize their own uh, experience of awakening as a spiritual master and as a teacher. So, Justin, I'm happy to share you with our audience, and I'm interested in hearing how you go from being a poker player, um, uh, a boxer, a restaurant owner, a builder, a family man with children. How do you go from there to where you are now in the Sierra foothills with community and as a spiritual teacher?
Yeah, a good question. Uh, I think you can only go from there. I think you have to go. I think life has given us as a learning, as a school, and if we go through it we go through it boldly, we go through it exploratorily, we go through it with energy and try to keep the fear of a minimum of at a minimum of success and failure, that that we move through those lessons and we learn and get free of some of the things and don't have to repeat other of the things. And sooner or later it comes to a point where what line in a Dylan song, what else can you show me? So, and asking the creation, what else can you show me, can only come after having seen a lot, because otherwise there's no else. You know, if a person circumvents life or is trying to escape or is afraid to actually actively participate, they never get to the point where, what else can you show me? And I got to the point of what else can you show me? And fortunately, I had a connection with someone who took an interest in me and helped me out to see what else I could be shown.
The so you I totally get it that we end up where we are uh, through the struggles of life, through life happening, and hopefully we run into someone who would be a mentor, a teacher, a model, an example that would attract us long enough to say, "Oh yeah, that's what I'm looking for," as a kind of a model. Would you say that that's what your teacher was for you?
Well, I crossed paths with him before I had any interest in the what's more that you could you show me. More I was interested in the adventure, more I was interested in the variety. But as I got to the point of being somewhat tired of my own manifestations, I started to appreciate the depth of his manifestations. And then he was able to become a suggester for me, as hopefully I am for other people. But he never really became more than a suggester. That was his way. His way was to lead from behind. And it was perfect, really, for me, because I was fairly egoful. You know, a New York smart-ass kid is pretty egoful. And I was that. And for him to confront me head on probably would have just fueled my competition rather than my curiosity to get to know more of what he had to offer.
Right. So this wasn't was this a spiritual teacher?
We'd have to define that term. He was, I would say the way that you define the term, I would say yes. So rather than go into a long description of word
Yeah.
semantics, I'd say yes. I'm
Right.
going to give you a yes.
Sure. You're familiar with the teaching of or you're familiar with enlightenment, awakening? Yes.
Yes. I'm familiar with
So
the terms.
right. So would you say that you had an awakening experience in your journey over the years?
I would say that I was early on, I was not receptive to something that might be called an awakening experience, because I felt that I had what it what there was to offer. I wasn't aware. Uh, the other day, I borrowed somebody's car, and I took a trip, 100-mile trip, and I drove to uh, to the city and back. And when I returned the car, I said to the person I lent it to, "Well, that overdrive is really great." And they said, "The what?" I said, "That little button that you push." And they weren't aware. They owned the car for years. They weren't aware they had another gear, and I wasn't aware that I had another gear. But as I said, I became tired of myself and my creations more and more. They became repetitious. I became aware, with his help and his questioning and his patience, that I had another gear, and then I became receptive to an awakening experience. And I think that really is what it takes. It takes receptivity. The more receptivity, the more possibility that there are things in the way of our receptivity. If those things can dissipate, then those awakening experiences become more available and available and available and available. And the answer is yes. My life has been an awakening experience and still is.
Right. Yes. And so there's a we all have different language interpretations of what words mean. And when I read your quote that what a spiritual master is one who has attained a state of being which grants the capacity, the willingness, and the availability to support others in their quest to become themselves at every level, from discarding the densities hidden in the personality to rediscovering the connection to the energy that keeps us alive, and to perform this service while asking for absolutely nothing in return. I think that's a beautiful statement and quote, and you could say it's it's an ideal that it holds purpose and vision all in one statement. It's beautiful. It's in the part of asking for absolutely nothing in return is that it's not conditioned upon it's not needy, it's not grasping, it's not conditioned on giving to get. It's a total mechanism of transfer. with no expectations. So I would say in that way, in saying, having said that, would you say that that has been the 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 reason that people would want to follow you into the foothills or follow you to these different experiences of helping reach out to others with compassion and support? Would you say that it's that those that are following you, that are surrounding you, are really adhering to that same sort of a decree?
I'd say basically yes. I wrote that. I wrote those words. They're not a quote from somebody who lived 1,000 years ago. They're a quote from me, and I do aspire to that those beautiful words that you read and that I wrote. Uh, I think you'd have to ask the students, those people that my friends, if how well I'm doing. Uh, uh, in regard to that. But what I can say is that the word following would not really accurately uh, uh, describe our relationship, because I think that everyone is responsible and has to be responsible for their own connection. There are no intermediaries. You know, breath comes to us directly. It doesn't come to us by way of another person or by way of anything else. It comes to us from that creative energy, whatever we call it, and it comes directly to us. So I don't seek out followers. I don't seek out people who obey or listen or listen in that way or try to fit in. Uh, I can make suggestions for people. I can do that without wanting anything in return. Sometimes they're effective. You know, I hold a record for spiritual teachers. Is that my attrition rate is the largest attrition rate of any spiritual teacher. I have more people have come through or cross paths with me, and very few have remained, because my personal the way I see it is I have I have the intimate knowledge of the path that I've taken. So since I've paid attention intimately with that path that I've taken, I can pass on pointers, just as if somebody's traveling through the airport, they can say, in order to avoid security, you can do this or that. You know, I've paid attention. So the few people that I can assist, if they have the intention, are the people that have stuck with me for the years that they've stuck with me. But I see that that uh, it's not so much that I'm selective, but what I understand in relation to what's necessary is relatively selective. You know, if you've read some of my stuff, you know I grew up in a relatively unique circumstance, with the three major religions all being represented in my family, actually in my immediate family, because my grandfather's grandfather came over from the old country in a unique way, with a multi-religion group, and stayed that way. So I have participated in the different religions, you know, with Christianity, with Islam, and with Judaism. I tried my way with each of them to please my family, and whether it's, you know, I tried the Allah illallah Muhammad Rasul, I tried the Shema uh, Israeli Yiddish sayings. I tried the Christian sayings, and they just didn't fit for me. When they were in the original language, I could say them, and they didn't make any sense but they didn't have to make sense because they were in a different language. But when they were converted into English, they made less sense to me. So that idea of a Christ died for your sins, or any of the ideas that were presented, they just didn't make sense to me. So I sought other ways for this spiritual unfoldment to make sense to me. And that's about what I can pass on.
Right, right. So yeah, that's interesting because the a distorted form of truth doesn't have the power to convey itself or to have itself be passed on, because it's just words, concepts, or ideas that, for the most part, in my experience, or I can only, yeah, I can say in my own experience of with Christianity or following different paths, the paths themselves and the concepts themselves will never uh, wake you up until you're ready to ingest and really understand, and then allow what's being offered to uh, to uh, to to be what you are. It's just a bunch of words, and it doesn't matter what language it's in. It's not going to be fruitful if it doesn't have a place to germinate and to be to experience what it's pointing to. And my thought is that with those three different backgrounds, uh, you didn't need the religiosity or the tradition to actually have an awakening experience. In fact, they probably were obstacles to having that direct experience. Would you say?
I think that's accurate. Uh, I think what I'm thinking of a moment that was very unreligiosity, but a very awakening moment for me early on, when this mentor I described was teaching me meditation, or trying to teach me meditation, trying to at least introduce me to meditation, something I was not quite prepared to do, because sitting still was one of my enemies. And meditation does require some amount of stillness. So I was in his house, and I came into his house, and he said, I'm not ready. I need some time. Uh, Maybe you could help me out and babysit for my granddaughter, who is in the other room, who is about 3 years old. And I said, okay. It's not something that I wanted particularly to do. I was about 20 years old at the time. And I sat with his granddaughter, and I figured it'd be maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes, but it was 2 hours. And I learned something sitting with his granddaughter that really made it possible for me to go in the other room when he said we were ready. So he obviously knew that my preparation for meditation was to get really quiet, because that's the only way I could contend with this 3-year-old, was to get low on the floor, sit down with her on the floor, uh, talk real quietly, follow her in her little games that she was playing, not try to assert myself in any way whatsoever, because anytime I would assert myself to her, it would be a non sequitur. So I ended up playing with her dolls, and I ended up talking very quietly. And uh, when I went in the room, I understood something about meditation that I could not ever have learned through a description or a lecture. I learned that meditation is a very passive process, and the more of me there, the less meditation is going to be there. The less of me there, the more of meditation is going to be there. So uh, what I'm describing is something that I understand in terms of experienced teachers much more than words and lectures teaches. Now, words are needed to set up experiences. I understand. I very much, I mean, I've written 500,000 words in all those books you mentioned. So obviously, I believe that words have a place, but words can't replicate experiences. Words can only point the way to experiences.
Yeah.
And that is the dynamic that I teach.
Well, is that so? So you have you talk about the natural state being a prerequisite for meditation. Could you explain what you mean by this natural state? It sounds like you had the beginning drop in that moment. Can you speak more on that?
I can, because that, I think, is our major undertaking, is to do whatever is necessary, whether it's a use of tools, whether it's a use of a playbook of some kind under supervision, whatever it takes to see that we're not we're not natural. We are normal, but we're not natural because we live in a sequence of negativity. We have illusions of ourselves that we're one thing. I'm thinking now of, I don't know if you're familiar with astronomy or astronomical ideas, but it may be a good example. Is there's an asteroid belt. There's a place where asteroids are formed. They're these big hunks of something, and they form from dust, and the dust coalesces over thousands and thousands, and sometimes hundreds of thousands and millions of years, and makes a big chunk called an asteroid, and it lives for a certain amount of time, could be 500,000 years, and then it dissipates. And during that time, we have given names to these asteroids. Each of these asteroids has a name that we've given them. We see them as a something, but in actuality, the asteroid was formed and it will be unformed. And it's formed from all kinds of elements. And I see us in the same way. We have a name, we have a fixed point, we see ourselves in that way. I'm Justin, you're Bill, and we see ourselves in that way. But really, we've been formed by so many elements that have come together for a time, only for a time. And our bodies and our individualities have magnetized those things, and then they dissipate. And then there is no more Justin, there is no more Bill. It's going to be a long time, so don't be concerned. And but since we look at ourselves as solid and not all these component parts, we hold ourselves to something that we can't possibly hold ourselves to. I'm thinking of my high school team. My high school football team was called the Lions, and high school doesn't last for a long time. But if you ask any of those football players, are you a lion? They would say, yes, I'm a lion. But they're only a lion for a while. That part of them that plays football is there for a while, and then they're not a lion anymore. And we're, as we are, ever changing from all these different interest groups that form to make us. But we're held to be consistent. We're held to remember things, if you know what I mean. We're held to remember on Thursday what we're supposed to do when we have other interest groups that want us to travel to wherever, to New Jersey or someplace like that. And so the idea of remembering anything without writing it down is remarkable. But we have the illusion that we have to make excuses for our consistency. And that's one of the learning processes that we have to go through, in my view, is seeing ourselves as we are, that we're not one thing. We're a whole community squished into one body. And we don't have to defend that we're one thing, because that's a full-time job. We also don't have to defend that we're frail and that we're easily insulted and we're easily made jealous and we're easily offended. And that's not as it could be, but that is as it is. And so I try, the most difficult part of the part that I play is to get to people who imagine they're okay, to see that there's yet things to be done to be okay, so that you can sit quietly in meditation and really experience what's possible there. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It causes me. I have a direct question for you to ask you to sort of bring it to the place of what meditation also offers. So, without the use of memory, who are you?
I think that's a penetrating question and can be answered on a lot of different levels. uh, we are a body. I am a body. I am an intellect. I am an emotion, a set of emotions, and emotional have the emotional impetus and energy. Uh, on that level, I have tangibility. It's dense. It's matter. It comes into being and it dissipates. Behind that, there is a finer something, uh, which is free of some of the densities, whether the densities be negative emotions or attachment to the feelings of the body from time to time. There is a finer place behind that, still a finer place, and behind that there is there's light and and sound, which is uh, not a metaphorical manifestation, but clearly a scientific manifestation of the buzz of the energy that keeps us alive. And behind that, there's that energy, that vibration, not vibe, but vibration that keeps us alive, and it is experienceable. So we do exist on all those different levels. Keeping that together would seem to be an inordinately complex task, but in actuality, if it is what is, it's the simplest thing of all because it is what is. It doesn't have to be created. Personality is created to contend with the world, absolutely necessary. A healthy personality, a healthy definition, a healthy individuality is essential, but it has to be acknowledged that it's coarse. It has needs, it has desires, it has likes, it has dislikes. Beneath that, there's something that has less need, less likes, less dislikes. Behind that, there's the possibility, the being that has the possibility of giving without expecting anything in return. That's not a magical something, although it is a magical in that discipline that you value and represent, the Course in Miracles. That is a true miracle, that a person in their natural state could actually be giving, not not force themselves to be giving or not remember to be giving, but it's there. You need less for yourself, you have more uh, to put out.
Right, right. Well, it seems like just like you described a beautiful description of the asteroid and how it starts with nothing and becomes something, and then is dissolved or divested back into the nothingness, and the we would be similar to that in these body form experiences, in that we show up and in these body suits experiences, and we have some contact with our true nature when we begin to experience uh, 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 understanding of what love is, or what connectedness is, and even the term compassion. In my mind, it's because all of these things that make up the formation of the asteroid is the same thing that makes up the individual 8 billion. Each one of us, we're made up of that wholeness, that when compassion kicks in, and when we when we have this pull to give without expecting anything in return, it's because we have found ourselves as the collective wholeness, and it only serves to give to itself.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I have found that there are spiritual uh, what somebody once called exemplars. Uh, this fellow interviewed me, interviewing different people he considered, or was seeing if they were spiritual exemplars. There seem to be different categories of spiritual exemplars. There are the people that have had an experience at a very young age where something traumatic happened to them, or maybe semi-traumatic happened to them, and the ideal became real to them, that happened. And 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 then they live that life. uh, I don't really know how those people can pass on what they experienced, because if they got hit by a rock in the head and became enlightened or whatever, the only thing they could actually pass on is uh, to instruct people to go places where rocks fall, and maybe they could get hit by a rock in the head. I don't know how they could teach the steps, because they really didn't have to go through those steps. And then there are the people who have gone through the steps and paid attention. The paying attention is very important, because when you climb a mountain, you pay attention. You can, and I have done that in a physical sense. If you pay attention, if you're taking somebody else on the rope with you and you paid attention, you know how to help them climb that mountain.
Right.
So it's having taken the steps and also paid attention. And then there's the elements of supervision, which I don't know how to circumvent. It's inconvenient to need supervision. Everybody wants to, uh, mommy, I can do it myself, or whoever, I can do it myself, or if I read it, I can do it myself, or how to, if you read a how to, you can do it yourself. But I haven't crossed paths with that possibility of not needing supervision. Now, supervision has been is a problem, because there are people who put themselves in the position of capable of supervision and really had needs themselves, and they weren't really able to do that. So supervision has gotten a bad name. The Gurus Union is really doing badly reputation wise. So, but it is possible to find someone who can actually supervise without, from behind, and also without need. And I see that as tremendously necessary, because the nature of our adolescent culture, and most people agree with this, is that the state of our being as a culture is far less than our state of our ability to create incredible things, whether it's artificial intelligence, or whether it's cell phones, or even dynamite. I was in, I took a train ride in Serbia a few years ago from Montenegro on the coast all the way up to Belgrade in Serbia. And we went through, they advertised this train ride as the most tunnels per train ride. There was probably 200 tunnels. Every tunnel was blasted out with dynamite, and you couldn't have gotten by train from Bar in Montenegro to Belgrade in Serbia, unless dynamite had been invented. So it did this great thing, and it also killed so many people. Explosives make wars, and bombs and all that is all part of that story. So we are capable of inventing incredible things. brilliance is unbelievable, but our state of being for handling those things, we have not figured out how to use a car without going from place to place as fast as we can and being dead in the middle. We haven't figured out how to use a cell phone without eliminating the intimacy of personal contact. But we have those things. And I see the same in terms of spiritual instruction, spiritual tools. They will be misused. We are instruments for misusing whatever we get as much as we use them properly, and probably more. So I see my part, that the most complex and the most intimate part of my job is supervision, to see to it that the tools that I teach don't go off the edge in misuse. The concepts that I talk about, that we're talking about now, don't get misinterpreted as something else. And I don't know, because I constantly see them being misused. So if somebody figures out a way to pass on instructions without supervision, I think it would be brilliant, but I have not.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, that's good. That's really important uh uh resource and a important instruction if people receive it. I mean, having a mentor or a teacher that points the way, that that gives you reliable models for uh, how to approach things. And we all need, especially in the spiritual, in the area of spiritual growth and taking on the position of compassion and leadership. We don't come into this world learning how to be gentle, how to be, be patient, how to sit quietly and listen and then act, because most of our models are not friendly to those environments. Even if you're in a church sitting and I've never been in a Catholic boarding school, but I've had friends, they weren't nice to the kids. They were pretty mean to them, or actually kind of rough, hitting their knuckles or whatever they do, and then putting them in the corner, dunce hats, all kinds of crazy stuff. So those aren't really good models. And I'm curious, because you mention it, about being a good leader, or a good, not, I don't think you're consider yourself a guru, but as a good teacher, leader, spiritual mentor. What is it like in your own community? How do you share those ideals with your community right there in Sierra foothills?
Well, we have a lot of contact with each other. Sometimes I think maybe a little too much, but we do actually also go out and do some of these social work projects or aid projects that you talk about. And it gives us a lot more exposure to the world than we would be here, because we're relatively insular here. And as I say, sometimes I think a little too much. And during the COVID couple of years, we were a lot more insular. We got to know each other probably better than we would have, because of the necessity of being sequestered. Uh, but we work together. We do actually construction projects together. We take care of the land together. We deal with money and food and all the things, cars, all the things that we have to do. We try to deal with them together in moderation. In other words, there's no really surrender necessary where you have to give up this and give up that and give up this. It's definitely moderately comfortable and moderately everything. So we get a lot of exposure, and there are particular tools that we explore. And I like the word explore because that means that what we're doing is not so much a fixed point, like this is what you do, but this is the idea that you explore and make it your own. Because if you can't make it your own, there's something of obedience going to be there. And obedience has a very short shelf life. It works for a while and then it becomes something corrupt. So uh, the method, the way I was led along, sometimes kicking and screaming, was led along uh, with ideas, uh, with simple methods that I was then told, see what you can make out of that, see what you can understand from that, see what you can develop in that, or if anything, uh, that can be useful to you or possibly even useful to other people. So that's what we do. It's a community, I hope, for exploration. I hope it's not a community for obedience, although obedience sometimes does rear its yucky head. And if there's enough people paying attention, that following and trying to lose yourself in the shadow of somebody charismatic, which is very distasteful, uh, it's kept under control because there are a lot of people really paying attention, which is a difficult thing to crystallize. It takes a long time to get a bunch of people that are really willing to do that for themselves and for each other, and it's gone that way. And that's why there's never very many people in and around what I teach.
Right. Yeah. And what you founded this organization, the Center for Cultural and Naturalist Studies. And is that something that is ongoing right now, that is busy doing things, has projects in the pipeline right now in the United States?
Uh, well, our our last project was in Mexico. That was in the spring. That was considerable. It was assisting the people that were coming up to the border and trying to become asylum seekers, coming up from South America, coming across from Africa to South America, and then up South America, and then up Central America. So some very simple aid, being in places where they were in need, and giving them blankets and backpacks and whatever they could need. We did that for a couple of months in the spring. That was our first considerable project since COVID, where we weren't doing any projects. We probably will do something in the fall. It has not taken shape yet, and we have possibilities, but that hasn't happened. But I see that as really relevant because anybody who can deal with the spiritual quest has the leisure to deal with the spiritual quest. And that leisure has a responsibility, in my opinion, that goes along with it. Because if you're working full time, two jobs, and taking care of family and worrying about all the things that you're worrying about, you're probably not going to be a candidate for seeking a higher state or a finer state, because your your energy is occupied with food, clothing, and shelter. So those of us that have that leisure, I, I see that we have a responsibility not only to pass on what we understand in terms of spirit, but what we have in excess in to give that people in need. It's very simple. It really is simple. You know, to try to explain to someone uh, how to go inside or how to leave some of the densities of personality behind, very complicated. Very, not at its essence complicated, but it takes a lot. Personalities don't mesh and like that. But if somebody hasn't had water for a day and you give them a bottle of water, that's it. You know, you're set, you've done something, you don't have to think, was that a good thing, a bad thing? You know, are they going to help? What are they going to do with it? Will they misuse it? You don't have to think any of that. It's just very simple. So we've made that part of our program, both overseas and both in the US for hurricane relief and other countries for refugee stuff. And, and it,
Yeah.
it just fits in so well.
It's super rewarding. I saw that you all supported folks from the experience of Hurricane Katrina, and I've worked on hurricane relief for months after Hurricane Andrew in Miami, Hurricane Ike when it hit Texas, and so I'm very familiar with those support mechanisms and how fulfilling it is. And thank you, Justin, for uh, creating the organization, the leadership, and the communities that allow people to follow that desire to help others and to learn and to grow into their fullest experience of themselves, both personally and also spiritually. And thank you for being on this podcast today, and appreciate it. Maybe you would return for another time because I feel like you have so much to share. You could we could do another episode even.
That would be great.
And Justin, maybe we'll meet someday. If not, have an awesome time there in California. Blessings to all.